Good morning, everybody. So today we continue our exploration of the Vedic Vision. And when we were talking last time about what kind of theoretical framework can be given to psychology, I was thinking of what could it be, and then I understood it is philosophy, actually. Philosophy is that mental framework for psychology to follow. If philosophy is not working together with psychology, there can't be real psychology of that kind we are looking for. And in the Vedic vision, in the Vedic paradigm, the psychology and philosophy are going together. So today I will introduce directly, immediately, without long introduction, the very thing. And it is interesting to say, before I start my presentation, that this was the result of long research, of many years of research, and it is an extract or the essence of this vision. You will not find it in one piece or in one explanation anywhere, but you will find it presumed in every text. And once you have that presumption, that vision, you will read every text differently. So that's why I call it a priori foundations. That what was presumed before anything else was explained or shown or addressed. So Sri Aurobindo says on the Veda, Veda is the earliest gospel we have of man's immortality. The central conception of the Veda is the conquest of the truth out of the darkness of ignorance, and by the conquest of the truth, the conquest also of immortality. Just look at these words, conquest of the truth and conquest of immortality. There is something going on, something is to be exercised, concentrated, in order to get somewhere. It is not about the description of the world as it is a movement and concentration of consciousness, the action of consciousness. The Veda is perfect and beautiful in its coherence and its unity. It's also an important sentence because many scholars thought that Veda is not coherent and meaningless in many parts and cannot be explained and so on and so forth. Written in different times by different minds, by different rishis, on different topics, in different paradigms. It's not so. They didn't have simply the key to see what is there. So what is this Vedic vision? Now, before I start this, I want to say a few things, that there are many myths in the Veda which are describing the beginning of creation from different angles and stages, so to say, and that is confusing when you are coming to this knowledge. Some of them start with a description of the Supreme Person, Atman, or Self. Others with the impersonal Self or Spirit, Brahman. Some with nothingness or darkness, night, Ratri, or Apraketam Salilam, the dark waters. Some even start with the description of Mrityu, that death was at the beginning. They refer to different stages of creation where darkness or nothingness is depicted as our beginning, but not our origin. Now this distinction is important. The origin and the beginning are two different things. We can easily reconcile these myths knowing that darkness was the result of the fall of the supreme light. Involution, in the philosophical terminology of Sri Aurobindo. So let us take a brief look. I will start with the myth which is depicted in Shatapatha Brahmana. The beginning. At the beginning was the self, Atman. Atma iva idam agra asit. He was alone as the sun in the darkness. He looked around and didn't find anybody else except himself. He said, I am. But there was no other name to say, for he was alone. He was not happy. He wanted another. Savainaiva reme sadvitiyam aichat. He wanted the second, another. Now, it's an interesting psychological insight. You can really put yourself into this place and feel in yourself this knowledge, because it is accessible to us. If you alone are, suppose, and there is nothing else, and you look around and find only yourself and nobody else, and then you say, you express yourself, I am, and there is no other name to say because there is nothing but you. But the very interesting thing that he looked around and didn't find anybody else. Where around he could look? Within himself he looked, and he didn't find anybody else. By the way, I skipped the whole passage on fear there because it's an interesting passage, maybe psychologically very profound and important, that once he looked around and didn't find anybody except himself, he got fear. And Shatapatha Brahmana says, indeed, the one who is alone is afraid. But then he thought, whom I am afraid of if I alone am? And fear vanished. And Shatapatha Brahmana says, it is indeed that fear comes from another. Now think about this. Fear comes from another. It doesn't come from yourself. So when he looked with the mind looking for the other, the fear already was there as a driving force, as a difference between him and somebody else. Anticipation of another brings already this fundamental feeling or state of being, fear. By the way, if you look into the etymological meaning of this word bhi, bhayam, it is very interesting. It has some other connotation that we cannot see in our language. If we take bha, bhi, bhu, bhri, the whole list of roots, you will see that bha is appearance of being, and bhi is that appearance of being shrinking. When being is shrinking, when there is a gap or there is anticipation of other being, there is a line crossing, or so to say, separation of the being from some otherness, then this sense of shrinking or fear comes in. Etymologically, it's quite interesting. And then bhu is becoming and bhri is bearing. Yes? You can see all the four meanings which Sri Aurobindo gives to the vowels of a, I, u, ri. Sampath will address this issue in detail, so you will look into that. Bhri. Bear or carry. I cannot speak it now on this language, but if you want, we will have the whole session on it separately. So the one who wanted another, he was not happy. Why should Brahman, asks Sri Aurobindo, who is perfect, absolute, infinite, needing nothing, desiring nothing, at all throw out force of consciousness to create in itself these worlds of forms? Why should perfect and absolute, infinite, which needs nothing, should do that? It's a big question. If then, being free to move or remain eternally still, to throw itself into forms or retain the potentiality of form in itself, it indulges its power of movement and formation, it can be only for one reason, for delight. This is the reason of creation. Can you... All forms which are coming later, evolutionary forms such as desire, or we will come to it, we will see that all movements or all feelings, even disastrous ones, the most undesired feelings, are part of this delight, distorted by ignorance, cut off from its origin, so to say, partially presented. And because they do not have that light of knowledge in themselves, they become pain. But delight is the reason of the manifestation of creation. By the way, Sri Aurobindo experimented with it quite a bit, to turn every pain into delight, and he says it is so. The pain is nothing but a delight presented, or so to say, distorted by ignorance. It is confusing maybe, but yes, we will talk about this later. The Supreme, says the Mother, decided to exteriorize himself, objectivize himself in order to have the joy of knowing himself in detail, to be able to see himself. Now, if you alone are and there is nobody else, you objectively cannot see yourself. You are the subject, and in order to see yourself, you need a manifestation, to know yourself in detail. Again, to have a joy, yeah? This delight to know in detail. The first thing in himself which he exteriorized, so to say, was the knowledge of the world and the power to create it. Chit tapas, chit shakti, consciousness or knowledge and power which will manifest it, do it. Double aspect of consciousness. This knowledge, consciousness and force began its work, and in the Supreme Will there was a plan, and the first principle of this plan was the expression of both the essential joy and the essential freedom, which seemed to be the most interesting feature of this creation. It seems that Mother refers to some other creations where there could be some other features. But of this creation, the most interesting feature, the most important, is essential joy and the essential freedom. These are the fundamentals. By the way, if you really think about them deeper, they will change your perception on things. You will see everywhere this driving force, this meaning of essential joy and essential freedom. So, the question is, How could he exteriorize himself if he alone was? How could he create another? How could you do it? Suppose you alone are. Just think, feel, go deep within. You alone are, there is nobody else. There are no other people, there are no other creatures, there are no other beings, no other planes of being, only you alone there. How can you really create another? How can you exteriorize yourself? Where would you do it if you alone are? Everywhere, only you. Imagination, one thing. Actually, people think so, and many religions think so, that it is only an imagination. You just imagine things, they are not real. Energy, so energy is you, everywhere only energy. How could that be some other energy than his? How? He has to? He has to split. He has to be not only alone there, but something else should be there, which is not him. Is it possible? If he alone is. Why I'm asking this question? Because this is the most fundamental question. If you really find within yourself the answer of some kind, that would answer all other questions. Create an opposite. What does it mean? But it means darkness. Thank you. Huh? The mind. Mind, yes, is the result of that thing. So, yes. Right. Yes, to forget oneself. To create the opposite. So what would that be? The eternal night. The negation of oneself. Negation is just forgetting oneself, nothing else. This word forgetting is good.
Why did he create the night? Why not another light?
Why not another light? It's a question. Another light is him, his light. So for another light to come, the night is essential, it seems. If another light is to be there, then there has to be a separation from that light, so to say, for another light to arrive at. No? More bright light than he is. He is the only light. If he can create brighter light, he can create less bright light, which is the night. It's not good. No, we don't like night. Night, says the Veda, was born out of the shining truth of the supreme power. From the night, the waters of the inconscient came into being. And from the waters of the inconscient, the time was born, the creator of all that moves. The interesting also here passage when Mother was asked by one sadhak about the need of this manifestation. She says that actually the Supreme already possesses himself in his supreme identity. What he wanted to possess himself in his supreme unity. And that is the meaning of the creation. Unity, that means you can unite with your other aspects, and through that union you can experience yourself anew. Because supreme identity was not enough for him. It's a very interesting psychological explanation.
If the supreme unity was embodied, like every time someone goes into nirvana or liberation or to
No, it is not that type of unity. That is again identity. You drop all the possible unities and you go into his supreme identity and you dissolve yourself. You are no more. That is what he was not looking for. He has it already. He was looking for something else. To know himself in detail. To see himself objectively. That's what he was looking for. And there he could experience unity, the consciousness of unity, which is not the same as consciousness of identity.
But why want to experience that when he is everything?
Why? For delight. For delight.
Just find out the inconscient, what exactly is the inconscient? Because ultimately there can be nothing other than it. So what's the...
Yes, we will come to this. We are just moving towards inconscient. Out of himself, he cast a luminous shadow, all these worlds, from the superconscient to the inconscient. Gradually denying himself, withdrawing his supreme knowledge from his supreme power. This knowledge and power at the beginning. The knowledge is withdrawn and power is left to manifest without knowledge. Becoming unaware of these worlds as himself. Of course, when we speak about out of himself, yes?
In Sanskrit, is the language gendered? Is it a he like it would be in English?
Yes. It's actually a grammatical preference. It's not really something we think today as it is male preference or some kind of... It's a grammatical preference. We can look into this if you want. Language, especially. I will explain how genders work. It's an economy of speech, yes? So out of himself is used here in a relative sense, of course. For there can be no space where he is not. Yeah? He is everywhere. So in order to experience otherness, he had to deny himself in his own awareness, gradually forgetting himself completely. His consciousness, chit tapas, has double nature, knowledge and power. To forget himself, he had to withdraw the aspect of knowledge from the aspect of power and let this power carry out the creation as if it was not he. As if it was not he. In other words, in order to see himself objectively as another, he had to create the eternal night. In Savitri, Sri Aurobindo describes the phenomenon as follows. In the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite, a contradiction founds the base of life. The eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void, and conscious force nescience and walk of a blind energy. And ecstasy took the figure of world pain. Ecstasy became the world pain. While consciousness becomes nescience, force does not disappear or become weakness. Think about it. But the walk of a blind energy. It is still force, but it is blind. The ecstasy, which is the offspring of both consciousness and power, also does not disappear or become a kind of indifference, but instead the powerful opposite to bliss, the world pain. These are the fundamentals. If you think them, rethink them, I think about them all my life. And it is just the beginning of thinking, always. So, according to the mother's story of creation, which she told to the children of the ashram, in the beginning, 4 divine beings were emanated from the Supreme, which are called, or these 4 beings, this is the picture, which are called consciousness in light, bliss, truth, and life. It's just, I'm telling the same thing a little bit different, and you will see later that it all corresponds to the one vision. After deciding to be independent, because the freedom is essential for this creation, they fell into their opposites. Light turned into a complete darkness. Bliss turned into suffering. These are the pictures you can see. The first light turned into the darkness, that is below the darkness, figure of darkness. Bliss turned into suffering, that is the picture of suffering. Truth turned into falsehood. And life turned into death. Darkness is therefore nothing but light, carried out by power without knowledge of the Supreme. So this is the darkness, the night. It is the light. It is the light carried out by power without knowledge of the Supreme. He doesn't know himself there anymore. That's why the light is darkness. Just as suffering is bliss and falsehood is truth and death is life, carried out by power without knowledge of the Supreme.
In the verse Asatoma, Sadgamaya, they have the 3 of them. They have falsehood, light, and life. They don't have the bliss element.
Yes. Yeah. It's very close to that. Actually, it is also very essential to see this. Bliss, yeah.